Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Face Tattoos, because nothing says you're friendly like letting strangers draw on your map. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome, oh my God, it's already off to a terrible start. Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Bob's Garage. Fixing cars since 1943. Get your car fixed or sold at Bob's Garage and enjoy a complimentary bagel. We are all over the place.
I know exactly where that's from.
Thank you. Nice. Welcome to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I'm Todd.
And we like to talk about films and break down TV shows on occasion. As filmmakers, I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm a director, and just a all-around one-man band at times. And sometimes I do a whole heck of a lot. I reluctantly wear a producer hat at times. You proudly wear it every day because Todd is a full-time producer, actor, writer. You've directed, you've run casting sessions and all kinds of things. So we come at the film analysis from that perspective of how can we learn and get better at what we do, and also kind of translate some of these things that happen in the film that maybe people don't see or, add up all together. Yeah. So I don't have
that. Most of that comes from you, I would say. I don't personally have, I have some technical insight for sure, but for the most part, I come from a less technical aspect, and I just like, how does this make me feel, or and I know you have those points too, obviously, because we agree on those most of the time, but I think a lot of times, I just have questions that you end up answering in your notes when you start, like, how did they do that shot? Oh, and in this shot, they did this and that. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's how they did that shot. Okay, great. But I really love watching films and TV shows and kind of just being able to regurgitate, my feelings on something. And I think that a lot of times, some people might think, that their feelings about either a TV show or a film are a little less important than how it was actually done. And I think that that's totally, I disagree with that. I mean, a good example of that is like Dave Grohl once said that his favorite song of the 2000s was Gangnam Style. And why not? Because that's an opinion. That's how he felt about that. And does that make him like less of a badass? Absolutely not. He's still like one of the biggest rock stars on the planet. Just because he likes Gangnam Style has nothing to do with anything. And I think that that's really an important aspect to remind people of like just because something isn't popular doesn't mean you can't like it, or just because people make fun of Backstreet Boys, you can still really enjoy that. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's not a problem.
No, I love
only
that.
Once, right?
And I agree. And I think for me, just kind of on that same kind of idea, the things that I really like is not knowing. I don't do a lot of research beforehand. And so whatever we see is what we really want to talk about, not what did they intend? And here's what this really meant according to the director. Like, that stuff is cool. And I think it's, part of a conversation that can be really important. But I think what's more important is, what does the audience take away? As a viewer, what did I see? And how did that make me feel? Why do I think they did that? Because ultimately, art, once it's released, no longer belongs to the artist. It belongs to the public. And that, sense of deconstructing it and finding the meaning in it, that you don't really get to determine what people see. You only get to determine what you present. And the thing you really are trying to do is try to make them see something, try to make them feel something. And ultimately that's a hit or miss game. And ideally, the better you are at your art, the better you are at, hitting your bullseye when it comes to that stuff. But ultimately, I just love trying to figure out, as a filmmaker, my favorite, and I think my best resource has been Netflix and HBO and the movie theater. It's what's already out there, what made the final cut, and what can I learn and take away from that. And for me, the most satisfying moments are whenever we do an episode and then someone like you sends me a clip and I'm like, like we did Dune, and we talked about a scene in there in specific, and I was like, this is what I think he's trying to do, and like, here's what the camera work is doing, here's what I think he's trying to imply. And then you sent me a clip of Denny breaking that scene down, and half of what I was saying was in there. And then, of course, because he's Denny freaking Villeneuve, like, there's another half that I completely did not see that is just, incredible and mind-bending. And I'm like, this is why he's one of the greats, and why I want to study him and try to get better at what we're doing. And so, yeah, this is always very satisfying. And on some level, yeah, I guess I bring a lot of the analysis, but you do so much more, because you come in and you provide so many nuggets. I don't keep track. Maybe I should, but there's so many times whenever either you'll agree and add or disagree and have your reasoning. And those are the fun moments to me, is the stuff that, where you're building. And that's the fun of any conversation, is the back and forth and the dialogue, and the things that we can both take away is really satisfying to me. Yeah.
Totally. And I just get an hour and a half of, talking to my friend.
Yes, ultimately.
Who, by the way, has a much better beard game going on
Yours is
than I do
strong,
right now.
though. Yours is coming in strong.
Mine is not. Mine does not grow out. Mine grows like down, right? Yours is like this full, lush, like journey.
That's my.
I don't know what's going
beard
on.
Comb. I don't know if you have a beard comb, but I've been.
I don't know. I don't have. I've not purchased anything to help my beard.
I have performance enhancing beard techniques.
Oh, you're roiding the beard?
I'm roiding up my beard.
Oh God.
What are we covering today?
What are we doing? Okay. Yeah, let's get on with the show. All right. So this week we are covering the show Squid Game on Netflix. So if you have not seen this, pause this episode and go watch the entire season 1. It's all streaming on Netflix, because we are going to give away a ton of spoilers and talk about the entire thing, the entirety of the of season 1.
Yeah, we'll talk about a lot, for sure. I mean, the thing that I'm most excited about is the iconography of Squid Game. I think this has a lot to do with why it's popular, and succeeds where some of these other similar, films don't do as well. We'll also talk about. We'll touch on like the Netflix business model, some of the pros and cons, especially around this game and this movie, film, TV series in particular, off the rails. We'll also touch on some of the odds and ends of the story and writing, like the ATM PIN significance. Is there a capitalism commentary running through here, as well as the value of human life and other such stuff and things and stuff.
All right. And now it's my turn to totally butcher every single one of these names. Here we go. Don't record this. All right. Synopsis of the show. Hundreds of cash-strapped players accept a strange invitation to compete in children's games, a life-or-death survival game with a 45.6 billion won prize at stake. Written and directed by Hwang Dong-hyuk, starring Lee Jung-jae as player 456, Yeong-su as player 1, the old man, Hoyeon as player 67, the North Korean defector, Park Hae-soo as player 218, the childhood genius, and Anupam Tripathi as Ali.
Nailed it.
Having a good leader is very important. The person is at the front and keeps an eye on how the other team is performing. And the rest of the team focuses on the back of their leader's head and follows their lead for the first 10 seconds. You have to hold your ground. You should lean back, practically lie down. Push your lower abdomen up to the sky as hard as you can, and throw your head back to the point where you can almost see the groin of the person behind you. If you do that, the other team won't be able to pull us to their side. Just hold like this for 10 seconds. Then the opposing team will start to get frustrated because they are thinking, why won't they budge? Because they believe that they were much stronger. If you can hold out for that long, you will be able to catch a moment when your opponents falter and the rhythm breaks. Now's our chance!
Oh my God. That's so hilarious to me.
it-
That's the only English
Yeah.
overdubs that I've listened to. Unlike some people, I actually watched this with the original language and subtitles. Todd, why did you choose? I don't even care what you think about the movie, the show yet. Why did you beat this show to death by listening to the English overdubs?
I didn't realize that you could watch it in Korean with English subtitles until I was at like, I don't know, episode 7 or something. And Scott, our friend who's been on the show before, said, "Oh, you're watching it in Korean, right?" I was like, "Oh my God, of course you can do that." I didn't even think about it. But the whole time I was watching, I was like, "This is so painful." Oh, the show is so good, but this ADR is literally the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've seen plenty of ADR, and this is just painfully, just brutal. But the moment I switched it over to Korean, I was like, it was just like butter. All of a sudden, it was so wonderful.
Oh, that's so funny. So you saw the final 2 episodes in proper format.
Yes.
I assume you didn't have time to go back and rewatch any of the others. And
A little bit, yeah.
Oh, you did. Nice. Yeah. So did this, is this a game you want to play? Like is the Squid Game, like, is that a really fun, time for you?
I loved the show. It was very enjoyable, very fun. And, I loved that the stakes were high all the time. It felt like everything mattered all the time, and how everybody just kind of, there was a lot of Korean film, especially lately, hits on like classism and all that stuff. I loved that aspect of it as well, but on the other spectrum from like Parasite. So, on the people who don't even have enough money to go into debt, right? So are people who haven't, this is like the majority of people, I feel like, where they're not like completely destitute, but they have enough money to have, to be able to borrow money, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or enough
Collateral,
of a
'cause to get a
status.
loan, you need some kind of collateral, and that requires having some ownership of something.
Thank you. And so it's like maybe a little bit more of like, of like the societal norm, and it's not just, it's not just Korean, right? I mean, debt is a huge problem all across the world, especially here in the States, which is one of the reasons why I think, like, one of the main reasons why it, like, might have taken off. But I really enjoyed it. I never knew what was coming next. I each of the games was unique and fun. That first game, the first game was really great because it really set the stakes. I mean, because it's a game that we play here in the States too, because not all of these games did we play here. But they started off with one that pretty much the world knows, which was Red Light, Green Light. And, when the first person was shot, you're like, oh my gosh, okay, the stakes are pretty high. And then they just start mowing people down, that fail the game. And then they keep going and they keep going. I think at the end of that game, I thought, oh, this is real serious, because you never know really what you're going to get. How, they'll be a little bit forgiving, right, or, whatever, but it's just brutal. Absolutely brutal. So they set the stakes really high at the beginning, and I really enjoyed that. And I felt like they kept it going throughout, and each of the games was unique and interesting. But I'm really curious as what you thought, because there were, they brought in aspects of the US in there with the what is it?
Right. The VIPs.
The what? The VIPs.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. They're bringing in the VIPs and everything, and what that might have meant, and which I probably could assume, but that and the brother
the police
throughout,
officer,
like that thread of the brother being the stowaway on the island throughout, But one thing that I loved, absolutely loved, was player 456's journey as a character. I just thought that his acting, the range of his acting was so staggering. And not just that, but the directing of his acting. I felt like I could see that, in a good way, not in a bad way. At the beginning we see him and he's this dude who lives at home, and he asks his mom for money, to buy his daughter, who he doesn't see anymore, a birthday present. He doesn't really work very much. He's just like this. He steals from her, like he's just this like drain on society. It feels like, and then in the end, being this just complete opposite, and you buy the journey, you buy why he's changing, and you buy why he does what he does. And at some points when he does what he does, it shocks you. And you think, I don't know that I would do that. Case in point being at the end where we've already done spoilers, at the end where he could win, right? And then his buddy ends up killing himself, like, so that he can win. I didn't see that coming. But he doesn't go to win. He goes back to his friend to help him. Like, his journey is just so complete and wonderful that, and a lot of the characters are, that it's just a great, great experience. The girl, I forget her name.
Yeah. Player 67, the North Korean girl.
67. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. She's wonderful too. And, I loved everyone. I wish that I would have watched the entire thing in Korean, because it would have changed everything for me too. I would have enjoyed it even more, I think. But even watching the ADR version, I was enthralled, and I couldn't wait for the next episode. I stayed up late watching it. I woke up early. It's like watched it during the day when I should have been working. It was just wonderful. But that's a question that I have for you, which is probably part of your notes, which is, one, did you watch any of the ADR? Two, the biggest question that I want to ask you is about the Americans and their inclusion into this as the VIPs, and what you thought of that. What, did it take you out of it that all of a sudden there were some people speaking American or speaking English, in it? Yeah. What'd you think?
So on the first question, the clip that we played is the only ADR I've heard. Like,
and it's obviously painful, right?
It's so painful, especially after the old man finishes his thing, and then this is our chance. Like, it's just so like bad. That would have killed it for me. I would have quit. In regards to the Americans, overall, I really enjoyed this. I love this kind of setup, like you're playing games for your life, and I loved all the wrinkles that they added. Like after the first game, they voted to stop, and then that's such a cool thing, because normally people don't get the option in these scenarios, right? It's not like in the Hunger Games. Everyone's like, yeah, we want to quit this. It's like, no. Like, we're here to do a thing. And in every other version I've ever seen that I can think of this setup of this battle royale scenario, no one ever gets a voice to eject. That also doesn't mean that they die, right? And so for them to go through that first game and say, we're going to take a vote, and for them to not only vote, but because that's a bit of a loaded gun, we need to see what happens if that vote goes through. Does it mean that they're playing and they're lying and they're going to do it anyway? Are they just relying on the greed of humanity, or are they going to let that go through? And so they wrote it so that not only do they have the vote, they win it, and they do get to go back to their lives and decide whether or not to come back. Like, that's such a cool thing. And there's so much that they accomplish with that, with letting everybody seeing why they come back, right? We see all their debts, legal trouble, gang trouble. The North Korean defector, the girl, is trying get her family out of North Korea and to provide for them. Like, that's a really strong motivation to put your life on the line. And I love that. Like, we got to really explore this other side of a death game, or whatever you want to call this. And that's a really unique wrinkle, because now, instead of just not wanting to see people die, you emotionally understand, one, they had the opportunity and they're choosing to be here now, knowing full well what the stakes are. At the beginning, you can certainly say they got conned into this, but now there is no excuse. They all chose this, and what happens next is, entirely up on them, every step of the way, because they can still vote to leave, and so that's a really very interesting wrinkle, to not only take that path, but provide a compelling reason for each of these characters that we're going to follow to still be involved. That's a stroke of genius. As far as the Americans, I hated them. And here's the thing. I don't care that they're Americans. I don't care that you want to harpoon America as the fat cats that are pulling all the strings and making other countries jump through hoops. There's a lot of truth to that. And I am not above reproach on that front, and having that discussion and saying, what is America's role in the misery of the rest of the world? I think that's all stuff I'm all too happy to have a conversation about. The reason I don't like them, the reason that I hated them, is because they're just ridiculous. They're just over the top. And you have this guy, I bet $1 million on that guy. Number 69 is such a beautiful number. Har, har, har. I'm like, it's just so hokey. And I don't know if it's bad writing, bad acting, bad directing. It's so kooky that I think the intention is clearly supposed to be comedic relief, but all I did was cringe. It's not funny. It's just not humorous. I don't know who you need to be in order to find this humor. Maybe if you are a South Korean and you're watching this, and if you don't speak English, maybe it's suddenly very funny because these are cartoonishly ghoulish, Americans. I bet it's really entertaining in that circumstance. As an American watching it, I'm just like, this is just bad acting. This is just terrible. And so from that perspective, I thought it was trash. That's I don't know another way to frame that, I guess. Did they annoy you, or were you just like, oh, that's pretty good? Okay.
Yeah, it was, but because I was watching the ADR version, it was like, well, it's kind of still better than the shit I'm watching. Right. Still better than the rest of the dialogue, right? So it was actually better.
Touché, Michael Bay.
That made it bad. But it's, it's like polishing a turd. Right. It's still a turd.
So
I get that.
Oh my God. Sure. Yeah. Next question for you is, did you feel that watching us the first time through, I don't know if you already had a heads up or not, but I did not. And so I'm just curious, did you feel the capitalist satire that was intended, or was it a little obscure and it just felt like, oh, this is just motivations and that's just kind of the world we're living in? As far as the meta conversation that I think he's trying to have in this, was that obvious to you, or was it a little labored to derive that stuff?
No, it was very obvious. I mean, to me, because the reason why they went back, well, obviously some reason why some went back was because of greed, right? But I don't consider that the main motivation of most people. I thought that the main motivation was to get out of the situation they were in, which was based on debt, right? For some people, not necessarily. I think, what was it? Player
218 had run up hundreds of millions of debt. He was like the childhood neighborhood genius that I guess started the business, went to the fancy school, and he was the crowning achievement of their neighborhood.
Yeah. So everybody had different reasons, but they were all based on, except for, well, no, even for player 67, I feel like everybody needed money for a certain reason. Either they were millions in debt because they screwed up in in investing, which is very capitalistic, obviously. They were either in debt to, loan sharks, player 456, or player 67 was trying to get her mother over from North Korea. And that required money for passports or whatever, but everything was centered around like needing money to improve their lives. In that aspect, yeah, they didn't go back because, oh, this is fun, except, I don't know, maybe some crazy warped people did, like the main bad guy, whatever his name was. But for the most part, it was the necessity for this, fiat, currency or whatever, like this is like this paper, right? And you're willing to put up your life for this. Except for, I think maybe the only person that besides player one, who, we all know what he was, whatever, but the girl who died in place of player 67, I think she might have been like the lone character who was not, it was not part of the capitalistic aspect of it, right? So that might have been calling out the fact that there's always a shining light somewhere. I don't know, but it was very on the nose for me of calling out the flaws in that, and how and I love your quote of the day, which I just read. That kind of like spells it out a little bit, right? It's like, it's also a smarts game in that regard. And I'm not really making a whole lot of sense, but yes, to answer your question, to me, it was very clear, but I don't know. What did you think?
I struggled with it. I didn't see it. I mean, I think the best I could really do is just from a very massive level. Like, you have people who are willing to die for money by jumping through these hoops given by the money holders. Like, I think from that level, I can start to construct a very vague critique of capitalism from this. It just doesn't play very strong, because in this scenario, you also kind of have to say, is the world being run by the Illuminati? Because these are all faceless human beings. And we generally have a pretty good view on who makes the rules in our society. If we're talking America specifically, maybe there's something in South Korea that I don't really understand. But I couldn't get a very clear feeling of where capitalism is really inserted in here. Your comments about the debt make some level of sense for sure. And I think towards the end, they even call out like the government didn't limit like how much you can borrow, like debt limits or anything like that. And so maybe there's a cross commentary about the modern version of how government interacts with capitalism, which I would have plenty of commentary myself on. But it felt, very thin. If anything, to me, it just came across as he started with this idea of what is capitalism, in his view, doing to people, and let's go from there on what people would do to get out of that situation. I think that's interesting. I don't know how strongly that case is made here, because, like you said, there's a variety of reasons. I don't think money in and of itself is a good sequitur to commentate on capitalism, because money predates capitalism by centuries. And so I don't see that as being a very valid, starting point of this. And so I don't know, it felt very obscure to me. I'm totally fine with it. And even if I would disagree, I just didn't really see it there. I was like, I have to go and read now what he intended in order to really understand and take away his capitalist commentary, because it just didn't feel very obvious to me. And maybe it's just obvious to him or obvious to other people based on your worldview and where you're starting. if maybe you're starting with the point of you hate capitalism, maybe it's super clear and pristine to you. I don't, I guess, start from that perspective. And so for me, you would just need to build that framework just a little bit more to help me get on that line, because there's moments in here that I'm like, okay, I can see where you can use this sentence and start to pull away some modernist capitalist commentary. There's that moment where I think it's before the marbles game, they're doing a night watch and he's discussing a strike, which is funny because technically he was fired, and I don't think you can go on strike if you've been fired. But the idea was maybe people who weren't fired are picketing as well. And over just feeling like a lack of control over their livelihoods, and the cops come and like break everyone's faces. And I think he sees a guy get killed from that. And that ultimately breaks him, which is a really good like motivation for what he does later on with trying to break out of this game and stop this. He's just tired of seeing people die for whatever reason, for money specifically, but in different circumstances for sure. And so there's that comment. And then there's these other little jabs that he's throwing that I think are pretty good, where, what is it? I made a note somewhere, but I have like 1,000 notes, where he says basically, through your luck and hard work, you made this work. And that gets said a few times throughout the thing, throughout the show, because there's also this moment when player 218 says that. It's after he kills player 67, right? He stabs her in the neck and eliminates her. Or maybe it's right before that, whenever they had that's what it is. They just left the hopscotch game. He's kind of talking trash about the guy that he pushed out of the way because they were running out of time. And 456 is telling him like, what, you didn't have to do that. And he's like, don't feel bad for that guy. He watched everyone else die while he had a way to beat the system. Why aren't you should be upset with him, not like crying over him. And he's like, I got here from my own hard work, and you can hear that kind of commentary as a damnation of people who, would say something regardless. And to him, he's making a comment that you could say that he's equating that to capitalism. Someone says they got there through hard work, and when in reality, they push someone out of the way and they're taking lives, whether, symbolically or literally, which I would assume it's usually a little bit more symbolic, but in some ways you can be literal if you extract far enough out from the food chain. And so there's some of those comments that I'm like, okay, I can see where he's at with that, but I think it's still pretty tepid. I think more than anything, it felt like more of a framework that he wanted to be true to, even if he doesn't go about spelling it out, which is fine. Like it's all fair game. I think I watched this whole thing and I was like, I didn't at any point, because I watched this as soon as it came out, I didn't see comments about it until much later. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess you could, make a capitalist. And at some points I may have had one of those thoughts, but it wasn't like this damning, beat you over the head, capitalist satire. I've seen other movies that do a much stronger voiced job at doing that than I think he did here. And that's fine. Like, I'm okay either way. Like I'm secure enough in my beliefs that you can critique it and me not, get into a fetal position over it. Like, that's okay with me. Like, challenge it. That's fine, as long as we can have a civil discourse. So
I would. I mean, that's interesting because I don't know. To me, the whole game itself is the main focus of the capitalistic focus, right? It's every man for himself till the end, till you have one man standing. It's the very nihilistic way of looking at capitalism, right? Where you have to literally kill everyone and walk over everyone if you want to get to the top, right?
It's a brutal view. And I mean, just as a sidebar here, that would be the worst free market ever, because now it's just you.
Now it's just you, but that's if you're going to critique
Right.
in a negative way capitalism, you look at it from the extreme, which is a monopolistic, thing where you have one Amazon, you have one McDonald's, you have one Apple, and no one else makes computers, no one else makes hamburgers, no one else delivers anything. It's that, and which doesn't exist, right? And it's illegal to exist. But you look at you if you're trying to, and I wouldn't go so far as to call it propaganda, but I would say, if you're making an argument against it, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
You compare it to just people killing everyone. I'm going to kill every single other, all my competition to get to my goal. Right. And yet you have the one person who then does it, but chooses not to in the end. Right. So you take that back and you say, this is capitalism. And I'm not saying this is what he did.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But since we're having a conversation, this is capitalism. You kill everybody, and you just, you stab everybody at night while they sleep, and then in the end, you have one savior who is going to, who's not going to kill everyone. He's going to try to save his friend.
That's fair. I think that's the best analysis. I think that is absolutely correct. That the idea is to present it as this, very animalistic, selfish, and careless method of getting everything you can. And then on top of that, to say that this is the way it's built. It's constructed to be exactly this by the powers that be. And this is where I'm like, is the Illuminati? Who are these faceless? And maybe it's faceless just as a means of insert your scenario, insert your government, or whatever. Right. And so, I think that's right. I have another question for you that I'll save for later. But the other thing that was interesting about this show was how successful it became, right? And this is the Netflix effect, because on the one hand, they said that it brought a value of 650 million. Now they don't tell you, I don't think they tell you exactly what that means. Is that through retention, right? Retaining subscribers, because Netflix is a subscriber model. And so is that because they didn't see, they saw new signups as well as higher retention rates because of the show? Or is there some kind of, what do you call it? Merchandising stuff that's going on? I don't know. I have no idea how and no one does. That's part of their secret sauce. But I was reading an article. Again, this was me breaking my rules of I don't understand what's happening here. And I was talking to someone yesterday that said he lost 6 teeth while making this thing out of stress. Like he stressed himself out of 6 teeth that he got, replaced false teeth for, which really blew my mind. Apparently he basically made it on his own. And this is the thing, I don't know what that really means to make it on your own. Like I see he wrote and directed it. But did he just not have producers like helping him schedule stuff? I can't imagine he was putting together call sheets, right? That's absurd. Right. That didn't happen.
Yeah. Not with that many people.
That's too many people.
And this.
Yeah.
At one point, there's 400 people in the shot. It's like, no, so you have to have producers.
He had somebody, but to him, it felt like he was doing it on his own, which I still understand that even if maybe you have a few people around you, there are times when either other people aren't pulling their weight or you're just not in a place where you can trust other people to do what you need them to do. And so you take more of it on your own shoulders. I'm certainly guilty of those kinds of things. And so he didn't get any extra pay. Like they brought in an extra, $500 million, or it produced a value of $500 million, and he doesn't get a pay bump for that. Right. And I think that's really interesting. For one, you can look at that a number of ways. On the one hand, should Netflix kick him something as a thank you? Maybe. I don't know that that's a great business practice, or maybe it's a terrible business practice not to. I mean, that's the kind of thing that when I'm running a business that I would probably do. If someone literally brought me $500 million worth of value, I can't see myself not doing that. That's just the kind of human being I am, I guess. But it also means for him, because we saw a similar thing with Stranger Things, where they renegotiated their contract and got a very handsome amount of money. And so for him, I'm like, okay, maybe he doesn't get a bump, but season 2, guess what? That's going to cost you $75 million to me. And then plus a bigger budget for the show, like, because they produce this on like, I think 15 million or so bucks. And that's a small amount compared to what things are doing these days. And so he, in every way, he should go to the bank for season 2 and like really, go ham on them. But their business model is an interesting one because they're making a lot of these. They're cranking all these things out, and to some degree or another, you are hedging your bets. Like, why not throw him $15 million to make his passion project, and then instead of 75, and then because now maybe instead of one of those, we can fund 5 of these. Right. And you can create more opportunity for a lot more people. And if you hit one out of the park, great. Here's a much fatter paycheck or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you want to comment. The other interesting thing about Netflix as a model, apart from, traditional media, is these episodes are all over the place. Like, they don't have a consistent 42 to 43 minute runtime. Like, some of these are 60, some of these are 50, 54. One of them's 35 minutes. I love that. I think that's really cool that you're not beholden to anything other than go create your art, make it the way you want to make it, and send us the bill. Like, I think that's really cool. There's a lot of, pros and cons, I guess, is my ultimate point of the way they're running it. I don't know. You can feel free to weigh in or not.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard thing because we are a content driven world now. It's all about volume and less about, I'm not saying, when I say this, it's with a grain of salt. When I say it's less about substance, I don't mean that stuff like Squid Game or, the Guilty
or whatever.
Like whatever, don't have substance. They do. It's just, there is a difference now, and we've talked about it multiple times on this podcast. There's a difference between, there's a difference between, and I think everybody who watches Netflix understands this difference between like a made for streaming show or movie and a movie that comes out in theaters, right? And maybe at the same time, and it's noticeable. And the problem is that because of, well, I'm not just going to blame COVID, but let's just partially blame COVID. Because of COVID, nobody could go to theaters for a long time. And so everybody had to rely on streaming. And so now that theaters are open again, everybody's still used to relying on streaming. And so you have all these great films that are going, out in theaters, but they're also going directly to streaming. Dune is a good example, and it kills me. It absolutely kills me. It's like, you do not lump something, like this massive tens of millions of dollars that took years to make movie in with something like Squid Game. They are not the same. They will never be the same. Netflix could throw $100 million, and it's not about money either. Mm-mm. Netflix could throw $100 million at the next season of Squid Game, or even if they made a movie about it, it won't be the same. There's a difference. And in something like I mean, it's different, I think, with when you have a season of something than when you have a film. But it just drives me nuts that now you have all these things that are going straight to streaming and not at least living in the theaters for a while. And the reason is because they're hedging their bets. They're like basically betting against themselves, but at the same time, they want to make sure that it does well because they put, so much money into it. Well, you're killing your medium at the same time. You cannot put Dune out in the theater and then also put it streaming the same day on HBO. That's ridiculous. That's like saying that you don't believe in yourself or in your medium for the next several years. That, like, a movie like that is the thing that's supposed to bring theaters back. It's supposed to be the saving grace for theaters, and you shit on it and you put it out at the same time on HBO. Sorry, but what the fuck are people supposed to do? Watch Dune on their tiny little ass screens at home? Come on. It's different when you have an episodic show. Everybody expects to watch a show, at home. And it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter the size of or scope of things. In which case, I think when you're talking about episodic things like Squid Game, I love your idea of let's split it up. Let's throw money at new directors, new writers, new actors. Let's build up a massive Rolodex of new talent. Let's do that. And I think that in that regard, Netflix is doing a pretty good job. They are making a lot of stuff constantly. Yeah. I think that Apple TV is making a lot of stuff constantly that we have no idea. We don't even know the dozens of stuff that's in the works. It's all made by new people or up and coming actors and things, and I'm loving that. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. I just think that the thing that bothers me is that there needs to be some kind of separation between stuff that's made for Apple TV, Netflix, HBO, and stuff that's made for theater. Because I don't think you need to be a reviewer of anything to know that there's a difference. Yeah. I think that you can just tell.
I agree. Anyway, sorry. It's frustrating because, to use that, specific example, Dune became kind of fodder as a means of HBO building out its subscriber base. Like, hey, this thing that you worked on for, the last 3 years, that's been probably a lifetime passion for Denny. We're now going to, because of COVID, and we're just going to more or less use it as an excuse to start to build up and try to win the streaming wars, which, I don't know if there's really going to be a winner. I think there will only be losers, people who can't handle and balance their books, right? Ultimately, that's what you need to do, is find the right balance of great content at the right price. The thing that also worries me about that, and worries I think most artists, is the old model allowed for a better way to price in royalties and back end, so that performance, which is a good free market idea, like if you perform well you get paid well, is going to take a hurting, because Netflix is going to charge whatever, $20 a month for their service, and that's just never going to change. And just because your film did well doesn't mean, my $20 that I used to watch everything else, suddenly counts more towards you. I can't, there's no tip jar for me to say, yeah, I'll give an extra $5, because I like this movie so much. Like that stuff doesn't exist. And it would be a nightmare for them to go and do this kind of Disney Plus model where you have premium shows, because Netflix is built off of, it's all equal, everything new, old, it costs you the same every month. I don't know. I think that's worrying, and I wouldn't be surprised if that comes up in some of these union negotiations of another way to think about, royalties and performance revenues of that kind. I don't know the right answer, but I think it is very much in line with what you're talking about, especially when it comes to movies, is to try to come back to the original model of movie theaters are a thing, and let's honor that process, which I think the thing that frustrates me about Netflix specifically is they rarely release their movies in theaters. And because they don't do that, they don't really do a lot of advertising for most of their movies. You build up so much real estate through those big releases that whenever it comes to Netflix, now it's a big thing, right? Marvel coming to Disney is a big thing, because that's a blockbuster that you and all your friends went to go watch in the theater, and now you can stream it at home. Like that has now more value than it does if they'd released it at the same time, and it just cheapens it. It cheapens your ability to market it later down the road, because now it's always kind of felt like this direct to DVD thing instead of this thing that has this larger than life, mental real estate attached to it. Yeah. Anyway, I'll blast through a few notes. The iconography I really liked, because I think this is one of the things that made the show really stand out. And it starts with simple stuff. All of this stuff is very simple. A lot of strong shapes and color schemes, right? Red, teal, yellow, solid, bold colors that just make very clean breaks and very clean division of characters and tracksuits, right? That's as old as it gets. And it just stands out. It's visually very identifiable. And they build on that with the masks of the staff, right? The staff members all have some kind of identifier on their mask. Circles and triangles and squares, and then even within that they've made tiers. So circles are the lowest on the staff, and then triangles, and then squares. And that is clever to me because it seems like they're building that hierarchy based on the number of points you have in your shape. Circles have no points. It's round. That's a big fat 0. And then triangles have 3 points, and then squares have 4 points. And so it's still adding on to this idea of money and points and value being tallied up. And it's right there. They're wearing it on their face, and that's kind of cool. And iconography wise, like even the coffins, they didn't waste anything, right? They have bows. They're this gift wrapped present to the fire, right? The fire of capitalism, if you want it to be that. And they gave their life, right? That's a gift. They didn't waste anything in creating this show, I feel like. And then of course the games themselves are very simple things, right? Childhood games, mostly universal mental real estate, things that a lot of cultures do. And that's one thing that people in the film industry are constantly hunting for, which is mental real estate, the things that you already know that they can use so that whenever they present an idea, you already connect with it. They've done absolutely nothing. This is why the boogeyman, replays again and again and again. It's because the idea of something under your bed, something out there in the dark, that's a universal feeling. We all feel that way. Or natural disaster movies will be here until the end of time, because we all, no matter what country you're in, no matter if you're rich or poor, in Texas or New York or Florida or Seattle, you all have an understanding of what it means to live through a natural disaster. And it affects everybody equally. Well, maybe not equally, but it affects everybody one way or another. Sometimes equally, sometimes not. And those are all things that we call mental real estate, the things that live rent-free in everybody's head, what it feels like to have parents, right? And so the more you can kind of put your finger on those things and extrapolate ways to play with them, the better. And in this case, childhood games, right? Red light, green light, like you said at the beginning, that's such a strong start. Everyone played this apparently. Like I never would have thought, people in Korea were playing red light, green light. But we played that as kids, and they built on that with this little girl with motion detector eyes. She's a giant, and machine guns, right? Like what she sees suddenly. And we of course get those nice POV shots. It's perfect. And the first person dies and everyone's a little confused. And then the second person dies and then chaos, right? Everyone's getting mowed down. And what I love is after that slaughter, the first person to move is the old man. And he's very excited about it. And it's creepy the first time you watch it. You're like, what in the world? And of course, the second time I watched it, I was like, oh, of course, like he's in on it. He was expecting the payoff that nobody else was, and which is of course why he survived and blah, blah, blah. Beautiful. The Honeycomb Game, like this is one that we didn't play. I have never Now, there's ideas within the Honeycomb game that we've probably all done with our food, right? Where you kind of chew it into shapes. And so that still has this kind of universal appeal, but it's still very childlike, right? It's on a playground. And so they're creating a very strong contrast of innocence and death. Candy, simple shapes, right? They have the umbrella shape and the squares and the circles. There's slides and sandboxes, and they're contrasting that with, boom. And they're contrasting that with all the violent murder and blood over such simple, tiny mistakes, right? It's like, oh, you kind of cut into your triangle a little bit, you're now dead. Like, that's such a strong, evocative thing. It's so wild and so crazy, but we're still in this very familiar place. And so the iconography is just very, very strong, right? And I love in that Honeycomb game that our main character, the one that we've been identifying with from the very beginning, he gets the hardest shape. And that's so satisfying. There's so much tension there, right? They're going to make us sweat for it, because we have the immediacy of losing, right? A huge gunshot in your face, right? And the guards are hovering and staring you down. Mm-hmm. And so the tension is just perfect. And then, of course, he discovers this little lick trick, right? Where you lick the thing, and it's so hilarious and horrifying to watch them all licking their candy like an ice cream cone, like little kids on this playground licking their candy, right? It's just hilarious and horrifying, all wrapped up into one. And I love that because it's also just this clever game that they're playing, right? They created a clever game with serious consequences. And then they figured out these clever hacks to play the game, things that don't seem obvious. You have one tool, this needle, and you got to poke out your shape. What else can you possibly do with that? Well, there's a lighter. Someone snuck in a lighter for cigarettes that she's now going to use to heat up her thing and save her some. Oh, and now this other guy's going to lick it, and that's going to dissolve the candy at the thin parts, and it's going to make it easy. And so it's not satisfying to simply see if they succeed, right? You set them up and watch, and who fails and who succeeds, It just feels a little arbitrary on that level. Instead, give them a clever idea and see if it works. This creates a lot more tension as well as a stronger sense of accomplishment when it does work. Instead of just saying rules and go, let's see all the wrinkles that come along with playing the game. And so the writing there is exceedingly clever, I think. Same thing with the night fight. Right? Now, this isn't technically a game to the players, but it's certainly a game to the audience. And this is a very nefarious thing because technically they signed up for 6 games, but through manipulation, they've created additional games for them to play. And so they set it in motion, though. They starve them and then watch them act selfishly, right? This gets back into the whole claw for it capitalist mentality that they're presenting. And so kill each other to eat, right? One man gets kicked to death, and I love the way they set the stage. He gets kicked to death, and it doesn't really matter, do we believe whether or not he got kicked to death? What matters is that whenever he dies, we hear the number go up and the money drop. And as the money's dropping, you see the ideas flashing across everyone's face, and no one says it explicitly out loud. You get hints. I think there might be violence, and if there is, let's gather up and team up and do what we can. And so there's a selfishness thing that kicks in. Let's benefit from other people's death. They're not, players in the game. They're my competition, like you were stressing earlier. And so we're all thinking the same thing. People are going to act selfishly to increase their odds of winning, increase the size of the pot. So we anticipate murder when the lights go out. And when the lights do go out, we cut to the control room and the heat detection turns on. And it's this beautiful little sequence because we're in this wide shot with all these camera angles, and this black and white, or this black suited leader, he's in the middle of our shot. And we see the first movement as a guy is crawling out of bed because we're anticipating. And I love this shot so much because that first movement takes place right next to his head. And so the blocking of this scene is crucial. They staged the first movement right next to his head so that our eyes would be drawn to it. We're already drawn to the center of the screen. And so to make sure that we see what he wants us to see, we're going, instead of cutting to a close-up, we're going to stay in this wide shot. And we're going to block it in a way that the movement, the only movement on this screen, is happening right there. So we're going to take away all the movement except the heat sensor movement as we're anticipating and looking for it. And this makes it easy to identify what's happening. It's just a very beautifully constructed shot and way to pull the audience in. Because now that he's doing that, now because we're in this wide shot, you kind of have to lean in. You have to stare. And that action, that very activity that you're making the viewer do, is pulling them into the story as well. It's creating and heightening your own tension as a viewer. And it's just gorgeous. Like, that's just a lot of very simple and very incredibly smart stuff as a filmmaker that Hwang is doing. And of course, at the end of that sequence, the old man calls for the end of the fight. And it's interesting to me because at the beginning, he was excited. And now he's begging, he's almost commanding them to stop, right? Because of who he is, that we find out. He's the one that's like, this is not what I signed up for. He was not enjoying that. And so he stays up even after that all night to protect his friends. And that's a really interesting, thing to think about in hindsight, as you're thinking about his perspective on the games and why he's doing it, as well as what it feels like to participate in it. That's pretty cool.
And what did you think about him, the old guy voting to end the games, to terminate the games? Because it came down to his vote.
He was player one. That's right. And they went in reverse for presumably that reason. I thought that was really cool. I felt like he wanted to make sure that the only people that were left were going to be people who wanted to be there. He didn't, maybe on his own conscience, have anything else. Not that you can really think that it's a weird thing, because at the same time you can ask, does he have a conscience to be doing this kind of stuff? You wouldn't assume so, but there's clearly something there, because he did vote to leave, even though he 100% intended to be there himself. Yeah. What did you?
You're spot on. He only wanted people there that wanted to be there after knowing what it was. Right. But he was willing to sacrifice half of the people, to get there. But then that also for us as a viewer, really, especially after knowing, who he is, really paints the picture of, like, okay, everybody who chose to die after that, or chose to go back after that, was willing to die for this, which, again, is that nihilistic view of capitalism, if you want to call it that, if you want to go down that road. It's a very dark version of it, which again, I say we don't agree with, that is necessarily true. So.
Right. Yeah, totally. The next game, Tug of War. Once again, it's a very easy, simple idea. It's relatable, it's universal, and it has very strong visual elements. Like, it's every time we step into one of these things, it's just very easy on the eyes, and it's easy to connect with, and it's easy to remember in hindsight. Like, oh man, there's this thing, and everything about it's universal. And they built on it, though. They did such a good job, because the weaker team certainly means death, right? Like, how can the weaker team possibly win Tug of War? And I love that they set the stage for that by having, an older guy, more women, versus the team that they're playing against. And so you're just like, I don't know how they're going to get out of this. And of course, there feels like there's no way out. It takes clever writing to find strategy and tactics on such a simple game. And of course, the old man provides a tactic, and the strategy almost works, right? But the other team at the end of the day is still stronger. And so they come up with a new strategy, right? Take 3 steps forward, 1, 2, 3. And then, of course, they cut. It's a great cliffhanger to bridge episodes and make you, I can't stop there. I got to know what happens next. And of course, ultimately it works. But there's this great moment whenever it's working. It's a sobering moment when 456, who is purposely at the front of the line, he's their strong face, and he's the one that has to face down the other team. And there's this moment where we go into the slow motion and we watch his face as he's watching the faces of the men he's about to kill. And it's brutal. And you can feel right then, you know, the fear and the anguish over this game really start to kick in. It's at that moment when he has to look at someone else's life that he's literally like pulling them into their death. But to him, it's also kill or be killed. And there's no going back. And I also love that the guillotine, whenever he does pull them and they're all dangling, I love that the guillotine doesn't immediately drop after they're just dangling. Instead, we see our team sliding forward towards the edge. And it's just, are they going to die anyway? Like, is this gonna, you know, are they still not strong enough? What are the rules here? Like, you suddenly start to wonder, like, how long do they have to hold on for? How long? What's going to happen? It's a great dramatic moment to squeeze just a little more out of the scenario. That's great directing, because that's the kind of thing that you might underthink. You might underthink that moment and say, oh, they're off, drop it, they're dead, satisfying. No, let's just an extra 5 seconds. Let's wait and see them start to struggle with that weight and see if ultimately it costs them something, because they're chained to the rope. Like, they can't escape the rope. It's not like they can just let go and they won. So that's a beautifully constructed game, and all the thoughts behind it. I never would have thought of the whole lean back strategy, and it totally makes sense. I completely buy that as a tactic. I don't know.
And the whole and just stay still. Like, don't try to pull back necessarily, but stay still. And it was wonderful.
It is, because now you can use not just your body weight, but both of your legs, because whenever you're staggered, both feet, one foot is carrying less weight, and it's almost waiting to get into a point of leverage before it can actually put in the work properly. Genius. Marbles, we go from there into marbles, and they set the stage on that one pretty fun, because before we even get in there, it's, you know, we're dealing with a common playground thing, right? The last one picked for a team, because we all kind of know that anxiety of waiting to be picked. It's a universal thing where, am I going to go last? And is my friend going to pick me? This person doesn't like me. And are they going to pick me at all? And so it's this great thing. And then they set this expectation that what happens if you don't get picked? Well, they'll eliminate the player, of course. Like, what do you think happens? Have you been watching? Like, this is not a forgiving neighborhood. And so we watch as finally he decides, player 456 chooses the old man, which I wonder if they did not anticipate. They thought this is going to get the old man onto the next game, you know, kind of an easy win for him. Instead, we watch him get picked, and we watch the crazy lady have her anxiety ramp up, and we see her panic and desperation. And so we're expecting her to die. All signs are pointing to her death. And so it's a really nice reveal on the next episode when we see that she actually finds out, we find out that she got a pass. And that's pretty satisfying, and creates more tension for the upcoming game. And then, of course, the torturous nature of the games really begins to crystallize during marbles, because it's not just here's a game, do your best to win. The games are now being constructed themselves to manipulate the players, right? And the previous game, get on a team, Tug of War. Now we think we're on a team together, and that's a good thing. Partner up with who you like. And so then for marbles, you select a partner for your team with the idea of unity. Except now they reveal you're playing against them to kill them. So now you've selected the one person you're closest to in this nightmare, and you're going to have to see them die or die yourself. It's kill or be killed. And so now you're lying and cheating against your friends to win. Like, that's so emotionally manipulative. And so, of course, 456 uses the old man's sickness against him, right? And of course, we don't see the old man die, but I like how they set that up too, because we also don't see Ali die. And so to us, they're just not showing us the pain of losing people that we like. Instead, there was something in me going off about the old man's death, but I was like, Yeah, I mean, I didn't see him die, but why would he live? And so they got me. I'll freely admit they completely got me. I couldn't figure it out, and I was just like, I don't see how he would have died, I guess, or lived, even though they're breaking a rule. I don't know. I'll just go with it.
Because you're right that we didn't see 67 die, and then we heard a gunshot when the old man died, when 456 walked away.
Yeah.
We still heard a gunshot, but you're right, we didn't see it.
Didn't see it.
And in this show, if you don't see it, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because they show everything.
They show almost everything, right?
Almost.
They picked their moments so perfectly. We're just not going to show Ali. We'll save that one. And instead we'll show you the girl dying for 67. We'll show her get splattered, even though it's out of focus. And so it feels like they're letting off the gas just a little bit because it's so emotionally painful. All those moments just drag you down. But I love it because these games are beginning to dehumanize the players themselves. And these are now the unwritten rules of the game, the things that they're not telling you, is all the side game, all the mental games that they're playing. And of course we go from that game, marbles, to hopscotch. And you can call this a number of games, either hopscotch, the floor is lava, don't step on a crack, or you break your mother's back, right? There's all these little childhood types of games kind of built into this one game. And once again, it doesn't seem, maybe even more so on this game, than all the others. There's no skill. It looks like it's just pure luck. However, evil can work. You can do bad things, and now they're starting to force people to mess with everyone around them, right? Force people to go for you, to pave the way for you. And it becomes a game of, you now need to talk the person in front of you into going, and preferably doing well. But again, what's most important is that the clock doesn't run out, or else everyone dies. And so it begins a whole other survival is based on what you're willing to do. It's not based on your technique. It's based on your savagery, evil or not. And usually evil will do better things for you than good things. And of course, for me, rewatching this the second time, I didn't have a lot of tension up until this moment. Suddenly, this still carried a lot of really good tension for me, despite knowing the outcome. I don't know if it was the sense of height, the sense of falling, or not remembering who dies when. I don't know, but it was just still a beautiful sequence. And then from there, we have the unofficial game of the knife game, right? This is where he says his moment, his line, "I'm not alive because of him. I'm alive because I worked my ass off." Like, bro, that's one way to look at it. And they set it up so messed up, right? They had this nice dinner and tuxedos. They even tell him, "Guys, don't worry. This is just for you. There's nothing to be concerned about." And then, of course, they take away the dinner, and they leave the knife. And now it's like, oh, here we go again. It's secretly another game because everything comes at a cost. And the saying goes, there is no such thing as a free lunch. And so this, I think, is playing on that concept. Everything comes at a cost. There are no free victories. And at the end of the day, player 218 kills 67, the Korean defector, North Korean defector. Last game is the Squid Game. And here it's just a constant ramp up of violence between players. Like, one thing after another, they're slowly building the violence between the players themselves. And in this case, there's no limit on violence. In fact, in lieu of playing the actual game, you can just straight up try to kill each other. Like that's what he says effectively at during the rules, the terrible exposition that they're in necessary. But the Americans just drive me crazy. So it's terrible to me. They're delivering all the exposition of how the game is played and why this happens and that happens. And of course, eventually it just devolves into a knife fight, right? And they're just fighting in the rain in tuxedos. And I love this sequence. It's messy. The camera work is messy. It's very emotional, imperfect. And even when the rain starts, I love that this little sequence, just as a filmmaking kind of note, because he says his line, I'm the secret inspector. That's what we used to call it. Then we cut to a close-up of rain dropping onto a shoe. And then we cut around the scene to see rain falling. And I love this because you have one line, the secret inspector, and technically what happens there is you don't cut away. You say the secret inspector and then rain starts falling. Now, if you want to reset that to shoot it, you got a really big problem on your hands, right? Like now you have to dry your character off. You have to change the lighting, like all these headaches. But what you can do now is get that line, the secret inspector, get your coverage. Oh, we're going to get it from this angle. We're going to get it from this angle, this angle, this angle. We're going to get it wide and we're going to cut in. And now all you need to do is, okay, we're now ready for the rain sequence. We're going to move to a shot of his foot and we're going to get rain falling there. And then we're going to cut to him, a close up. The rain's going to fall on his face. We're going to cut to player 218, a wide of the whole set. And then we're going to get, the rain hitting the windshield of the audience. Now you've just, through one close up, given yourself leeway to create a whole new sequence that's setting up here without having to shoot yourself in the foot, no pun intended here, to get it right and reset and, be a big pain in the ass on filming the sequence. That's a tricky thing, to find simple ways to break up your shot list in ways that don't destroy making your day. Because at the end of the day, it's a business. You got to run on time and you got to find clever ways to make sure all this happens and emotionally fits the beats that you try to hit. My God.
Yeah.
It's all in the details. Yeah.
In the I guess what is the hopscotch one? Was it, why didn't they try to stand on the center railing? Is that illegal? I don't know.
Yeah, I think because no one even tests that idea and gets shot. I wondered that too. I'm like, you could have just walked down the rails. And maybe they're just afraid of breaking the rule and they don't want to get shot for it.
Yeah.
But I still would have liked to have seen, you have a ton of players, sacrifice one of them to demonstrate what happens when you do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe at the end, because I don't fully know. But that was one thing that stood out
I also
on that one, because that one is super stressful.
Super stressful. I also wondered why not grab your shoe and launch it at one of those things and see if it breaks? They said you have to take your shoes off, not that you can't take your shoes with you.
With you. Right. Right. Exactly. Good point.
And all these games are all about being literal to the rule, not the spirit of the rule. None of this is about the spirit of the rule. It's all finding the way around the rules. And so that's
really smart.
That's
really smart. But all that to be said, we would immediately die.
Yes. I'm not making it through that.
Yeah. But yes, that's very smart.
Anyway. Yeah. The other thing that's nice about the Squid Game is we end that final game at the start of the final episode. We're 15 minutes in and that game is over. And that leaves room for wrapping up the season, setting up the next season, looking at the fallout from playing the games, all those things. It's smart. That's the way you want to do it. I'm glad they did it that way. The other way is, of course, to leave you on a cliffhanger and come back for next season. But again, the nice thing about a lot of these Netflix style business models is you play it to the bone. Give us everything. And if it's good, we'll come back for another season of it. Whereas in network television, the traditional way would be, we're not going to give you the satisfying ending. We're going to make you wait until next season to find out. And that is not fun.
Yeah. I know.
Odds story writing, odds and ends. The pin number I thought was interesting. Because at the end of the show, right, his pin number is his player number, 0456. That's an obvious thing. What other number, 4-digit number would he know to use? So of course that makes it obvious. But I think they added meaning to it by using the first episode to set up another pin number, which is at the start of the show, he has access to his money to his mom's money, through his daughter's birthday, right? That's the pin to his mom's ATM card. And so if you combine that with his player number, the end kind of paints a story, an arc just through the pin number, right? It's not his daughter's birthday. The money instead represents death, not love, not joy, not something that he's proud of. Instead, the pin number represents something that he's deeply ashamed of, and wounded by. And I think that's just a very subtle, simple kind of before and after picture that they're painting about this man's life. That's really clever and just told through a pin. I like that. The game's reason for being, right? Player one was rich through lending money to others. And he asked this question: what's common between being too rich and being too poor? Living's not fun, right? No matter what you buy or eat, it's boring in the end, and there's no joy in life. And I just wanted to play the game. And for you, to me, you're just a horse. You're a horse on a racetrack. And that's a cool analogy, because at the beginning of the show, 456 went to a racetrack. Did he feel bad for betting on those horses at the start of the show? Probably not to our knowledge, right? He's celebrating like a mofo, right, over his victory. That, of course, he gets taken away from him. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, and so the other interesting thing, one other small tiny thing, I think they reversed the numbers on the player card, the business card that they're handed. At the beginning, I want to say it was 010034, and at the end it's 034010. So they reversed the numbers from the beginning, and so it just made me ask questions. I don't think I have the answer, but things are now reversed, right? Maybe the world is upside down now to him and his perspective, or maybe now he's the hunter and the game runners are his contestants. Maybe the shoe's on the other foot, that kind of thing. I don't know. I think there's some ideas you can pull out of that. It doesn't seem like he left a lot to chance. I feel like this writer was doing a lot of things very detailed, and that doesn't seem like an accident. I have, on that same idea, it looks like all the players at the beginning chose the blue flip card in the slap game. Whenever they're in the train station playing the game, right? It looks like everyone's playing blue. Someone put that in my head, and I was like, and so on my second time through, I was looking for that. And they go through a bunch of sequences whenever they're introducing all the players, and they're seeing how they got sucked into this thing. And they're all playing that card slapping game. And some of them flash by a little too quickly, but it looks like all the players are playing the blue card. So maybe if you play the red card, you become a staff member, which is nice to see the perspective of the staff through the detective or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. Side note, 100 million won for each player. The human life, according to, what do you call them, actuaries, I believe, is worth about 10 million USD. And I'll put a link in the show notes that shows you how, I think they talk about how they derive that estimate. But yeah, you have a general dollar amount assigned to you when people are figuring out insurance needs and stuff like that. In fact, I think there's a whole movie on Netflix about how they tried to arrive. And I've heard interviews with this guy, this attorney who's trying to figure out how to assess what the lives are worth for each person who died in 9/11. And that becomes a whole, undertaking of how do we arrive at this number? And that's an interesting movie, and it's an interesting story. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that's a crazy concept, because, I mean, how can you price potential, but at the same, because it's, almost arbitrary and or subjective in every facet. But at the same time, when you have to pay out based on something, you need to create numbers. So that's I haven't watched that, but I want to.
It's good. I like it. I mean, Stanley Tucci is always worth watching. So
yeah.
Yeah. And so another small note, voting to end the game. There's this shot that they do, this kind of reverse shot. The next woman after 456 votes to end the game, right? The next woman up, she walks up and she sits at the ballot box to the side, and we just kind of wait. And we hover, the audience, the viewer, the camera, we hover over her shoulder for several beats, and then she turns around and looks up at us. And then we do this reverse POV of her view of the big piggy bank filled with cash in the sky. And I love that, because then we do another reverse shot as she turns back around and votes, I want to keep playing. And I love that camera angle because it's almost a POV from the piggy bank's perspective. And it's like the money is watching her, tempting her. And it's just a very simple camera cinematography trick to make you feel what she's feeling, and to get an idea of why she's choosing what she's choosing. Yeah, smart, simple. My last note is getting released in episode 1. I kind of already touched on this. They get released, and for one, when we get dumped out with 67 and 456, they released on the road, and they light that street up with strong primary green colors, like lighting the forest on the sides. Like super goes back again to the iconography of strong colors, strong shapes, strong symbols, very easy on the eyes to identify all that stuff. The other thing that I liked was whenever they go back and they're waiting to get picked up, most people at the pickup are wearing shades of blue or gray, but the old man is wearing a green jacket over a blue shirt. Song, our main character 456, is wearing a blue hoodie over a green shirt. And so I feel like maybe it's just this very subtle idea that the player 1, the old man, is kind of the secret inspector in a way. Like he's wearing the blue like everyone else, but he's not really like everyone else. He has money, whereas player 456 is destined to win. So even though he has the blue hoodie on, he still has this green, shirt that would represent money or victory, or the capitalist win, so to speak.
Cool.
I don't know. So that's all I got.
No, that's great. Those are, I mean, I didn't pick up on most of those. So thank you for that. My gosh, that's awesome. What was your favorite moment?
Ooh.
Do you have a favorite moment?
Man, you know what I think I liked the most was, that's hard, because my favorite character in here was probably 67. I loved how kind of cold and distant she was from everybody. But I think my favorite moment was between Ali and player 218. Watching him get fooled by 218 was really heartbreaking. Like that broke me up far more, at least as much as the old man getting fooled in the marble game. And so watching player 218 kind of slowly devolve into this flaming garbage, pile, was really heartbreaking, especially because of how much I liked Ali. Like he got screwed over at work, right? They wouldn't pay him. And ultimately that's why he came back to this game, and he's just trying to do right for his family. And then you have how much he loves this guy. It's very much the puppy who loves his owner, and he's just there for him. I'll do whatever you say, and he just happens to be winning. Like he's winning this game, and this guy just can't handle it, and he abuses his trust. And that to me is so heartbreaking, is when seeing someone who loves someone else so much and then have that trust abused. That's brutal for me. Yeah. I don't know. What about you?
That's a good one. That's good. I really loved I keep going back to the hopscotch game for whatever reason. It's just, I think it's my favorite. There's a moment where, because we know that 456 is last. He gets the 16 jersey. And there's a moment, finally, he goes. It's his turn. And he forgets, after everyone is gone, he's looking so far ahead that he forgets that which one, right or left, on the first square. And so he's like standing there and he's so scared. And he asks
67.
What's the 67? Thank you. He asks 67, which one? And she said, left one or whatever. Says, it's the left one. Get your shit together or something.
Yeah, that's right. Get it together, man.
And I think it's, I don't know. For some reason, I just loved it so much because no matter, even the people who win still need help.
That's good.
and sometimes the easiest of things, because they're looking so far ahead that they forget what's right in front of them, and they need to be reminded, you got to do this before you do that. You got it. You know, like
And I
you got to
forgot.
step on the first one before,
Because I was
you-
like, yeah, which one is it? I already forgot too.
yeah. Exactly. That's the other thing. Like, I forgot too. I was like, dude, I don't even know which one. I forget. Yeah. So anyway,
No, it's such a good point though, because it's a great writing decision to not have the first guy immediately die. Instead, he gets one right. And you're going to save that for just an extra brief moment of tension at the end of that sequence. That's genius.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Anyway, I just loved that game.
question.
I don't know why.
My last question for you is, what games do you think we're going to see in season 2?
Oh man. Probably. If I have to guess, that's a very, very good question. I have no idea. But if I had to guess, just because if they really are focusing on that, trying to be focused on that capitalistic thing and play with the whole American thing, probably maybe more American games, or games that they know that Americans, especially because it's such a success here as well. I don't think that I don't think that they would like go Western just to be more successful. And that wouldn't be, I don't think that's why they would do that, but I think maybe to play on that a little bit more. I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah.
I really don't care. Because I didn't know, I didn't know what Squid Game was, right? But and a couple of these games I didn't really, like the Honeycomb one was very much probably Korean and not American. That was totally fine, and that was stressful as hell.
Yeah.
So I'm completely okay with whatever they go with.
That's so
But
good.
that's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I made a list of all the ones that are possible to me. Tag, I don't know how you pervert that.
Oh my God.
But tag is
Yes.
same thing like hide and seek.
Dodgeball?
Ooh,
Hide and seek.
didn't think of dodgeball. I think an obstacle course is pretty like basic. Kids like running around things, and it's super easy to start setting up traps. And it can be a similar thing with first person, last person. And so obstacle course or some kind of maze, like a hedge maze, would be a really fun one. I don't know how you do this one, but I Spy. I wonder what they could do with an I Spy thing.
Bro, yes.
That would be fun.
Those are great. But, we have this added aspect of 456 now, like going after them,
Playing again. Yeah.
like going after the whole Squid Game after all of these people. So I don't know, is he going to go back to it and play it again? Or is he going to try to destroy them like the brother of the main head guy? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. But that's just another wrinkle.
I think
'Cause he's pretty determined.
Simon Says would be an easy one, right? That's maybe even your opener.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
That's it's very much like red light, green light.
Yeah. That's an easy one.
Duck,
Duck Goose would be particularly brutal. And I thought this one is kind of like hilarious and maybe, but seems maybe too brutal. Finger painting, except you have to use one of your fingers for the blood source.
Oh my God. Wow. Oh man. Yeah, they should hire you to write this thing. That's awesome.
And then my last one was Thumbs Up 7-Up.
Oh yeah. Heads up 7.
Heads Up 7-Up. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a very easy game of if the person picks you, then you die, and if you pick wrong, then you die. That becomes an emotional game of who do I think wants me to die? Who do I don't know. Like it becomes a very messed up psychological game of trying to figure out who would have selected me, and for what reason. Yeah. So I think that's all I got. Anyway, what are you going to recommend this week?
So this week I'm not going to recommend a movie. There's a lot of them that are out there that are really good, especially right now. But I got something interesting. that I'm relearning how to do the Rubik's Cube because I'm very slow and I'm getting I'm having to start over because the way that you do it is you get the cross.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way you've always done it. I learned it the corners. And so I get corners first. I've always done it that way. It's just way easier because I don't have to memorize what color goes where.
Mm.
It's like I get a corner and I know that's the green side, right? No matter where I turn it, I need to get another green side, So it just is very clear to me and obvious. Well, I'm switching it up. I'm doing the cross first now, and I'm doing this whole other like F2L situation where you get the first 2 layers, but you do the whole thing with the white on the bottom. You never flip it over.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great channel on YouTube called J-Perm. So I'm recommending his channel because he really explains it very well for someone. Because a lot of times you go to channels and they're like, okay, you just do this algorithm. And you're just kind of like, wait a minute, dude, you lost me.
Yeah.
But he walks you through everything and how to go from beginner method to an intermediate method. And he can go very detailed. I mean, he's like a sub 10 guy. He's like,
will this method get you under a minute?
It'll get me under 30 seconds.
Nice. Because I think my method,
eventually,
I never was able to get under like 90 seconds. That was kind of my max.
It's not easy. It is.
Right. There's some.
I mean, learning anything general when you're 40 is hard, but unlearning something that you've known how to do for years to learn something completely different. So basically, I'm looking at this thing, like I've never done it before, and it's really hard because the way that you have to do it, there are like 10 different scenarios, and you have to see one, do that thing, and then go to another one. See one of the 10, do that thing. So it's going to take, I would, in another month, I'll be sub-minute every time, I think, and then maybe even sub 30 by Christmas. That's the goal.
Damn.
Sub 30 by Christmas.
Nicely done.
But I got a brand new cube, super fast cube with magnets, the magnetized one, and it's super like butter. You got one?
Not with the magnets. Yeah. I just have the speed cube. It's pretty silky. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, this guy is really great. So J-Perm.
Nice.
Follow him.
Yeah, we'll
check him out.
Link that in the show notes. Nice. I'm going to recommend, if you like Squid Game, there's a similar show that came out sometime last year. It's called Alice in Borderland. And I really enjoy it. I like it more than Squid Game personally. Not because I don't like Squid Game. I love Squid Game. I'm super excited for season 2. But I don't know. There's something a little bit more mysterious. I like the technological aspects of Alice in Borderland. And that's a little more tech heavy. So it's also on Netflix. So if you like Squid Game, you should have access to Alice in Borderland. Nice. And so, stay tuned. Next week, we begin a little trilogy series. It's called the Before series. And so we're going to start with Before Sunrise. It's Linklater's film. This was a seminal movie in my life. And so I'm really excited to take a look and hopefully have something interesting to say about it, because I don't know, that movie just captivates me and I kind of get lost. And so, have you seen Before Sunrise?
No.
Oh, so you might hear why Todd hates it then coming next week. And so stay tuned.
What?
Because he signed us up for all 3 of these. So
why would I? Okay. All right.
Who knows,
all
man?
Right.
Who knows? I remember the second one came out and I was excited about it. And my buddy that I grew up with watched it and he hated it. And he's like, man, there's this movie I went to see and it was just terrible. Like, don't go see this movie. And I was like, what movie? And he was like, Before Sunset. And I was like, oh no, I love that.
Oh, no. Why am I going to hate it? A bunch of kids die or something?
No,
like
no. It's just one of these movies that you either really like what it's about or you don't, because it does not change from the first minute to the last minute. It's kind of one thing and one thing only.
Cool.
And so it's either your cup of tea or not. Yeah.
Okay.
So
cool. I can't wait.
Yeah, me too. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe, drop us a review on iTunes, leave us a note. If there's something you want us to talk about, or a kind of thing you want us to talk about and analyze, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/Squid Game. I think I butchered my delivery there. It's supposed to be, if you want to leave a note on this episode, it's thepestlepodcast.com/Squid Game. Wes, what the heck?
Golly, you had one job.
One job.
And we'll leave you with a quote of the day from John Maynard Keynes. If you owe your bank £100, you have a problem. But if you owe $1 million, it has the problem. That is such an interesting way to look at debt that I honestly don't think about very much because I hate the feeling of being in debt so much. My main goal anytime I'm in it is to get out of it.
Yes.
Right? Just hate that feeling. But there's also good debt, right? I'm not saying owing £1 million to the bank is good, but maybe if you own, because of it, you own something that's generating income. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of aspects to that, but that's an interesting thing at what point is it not your problem necessarily because you're never going to be able to pay it back? If it's not loan sharks, right? And they're going to take your fingers off. If it's a bank, maybe they shouldn't be lending you so much money. I don't know.
And for me, it's interesting because Keynes is the kind of the father of our modern monetary theory, and to my everlasting dismay. And so it's just interesting to have him in particular having that perspective, because he, I'm not sure if he was the architect of the Federal Reserve or the best exploiter of the Federal Reserve, but he designed, modern monetary theory with quantitative easing and all these kind of Federal Reserve aspects of inflation and the way to kind of keep the market stable, or at least that's his goal, and try to
theory.
Yeah, the theory. And so I just found it very interesting that he would say something like that, just because he's all about loaning out millions and millions of monies. So,
well, I think I mean, he's not stupid.
He's not a dum-dum. I'll agree with that 100%. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Brilliant quote. I mean, I absolutely love it. I love it. I think it opens a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is fun. Thank you guys so much for joining us and staying with us. I know it's been a long one, but it was a blast. So make sure to subscribe, review us on iTunes, share us with all your friends, and recommend something. We would love to hear what you'd like to hear us cover. Until next week, I'm Todd.
I am Wes.
Go watch the movies. Like breaking shit.
Yeah.